Now we're going to mount our speaker panel. And in addition to the speaker panel, we're also going to put some more displays on here just because we can. So we got our single color LED matrix, got our 7 segment, got a couple mini OLED displays over here. Of course, here's our speakers, speaker grill, got some covers for the displays, got a bunch of buttons which we're going to go here, a wiring harness, speaker amp, and the controller board for the displays, which is actually, if you're familiar with Arduino, this is nothing more than an Arduino. Specifically, this is a Cduino, which is an Arduino clone, which is what I'm using for this project. So, when you mount this stuff, very important that you do it in this order. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to mount the controller board or the Arduino on the other side of this guy. So if I flip it over, I can see there are 3 mounting holes that will line up with the Arduino. So the first thing I want to do is take my nylon screw and I want to put it through here. That's a little bit of a tight fit. Okay. And then I want to take my nylon hex screw and just put it on. And this is just going to basically act as a spacer. So we got a little room for the board so it sets up a little bit. I'll show you what I mean. So when the board is mounted like so, we don't want the board just totally flush because it's got some those wires, basically these solder joints at the end are going to bow the board. So if we have that little spacer, then it's going to sit there and the board isn't going to bow and we're going to have a nice clean install. So let's just do that. Hand tighten is fine for this. Okay, so we got that. And then now it's just a matter of just taking our board and just setting it right on there. Okay. So now you can see it's nice and it's not bowed at all. Nice clean mount there. And then we'll just take our screws here. And this is a little bit of a tight fit, so you just gotta get them in there. So now let's mount the displays. So let's start with the 7 segment displays. Again, our display started out like this. So we're going to take off this one, and we're going to take off this one. So we can basically get to the screws. So then I'm just going to take 4 screws. Now let's just do this one at a time. So I'm going to flip it over, and I want to put in my spacer. So I got my hex screw spacer, and let's just screw that on. Okay, so now we've got our 4 screws here. Let's just double check that they're long enough. Yep, so that's good. So, okay, doesn't want to come out. Okay, so now actually would be okay, let's put these back on first. And again, just make sure you don't bend the pins. So now you want to actually take off this protective covering, because once we have it mounted, we've got our cover on it, you won't be able to get to this protective film. So now is a good time to take that off. And you take it off, make sure the display doesn't come out. Okay, so I've got our display ready. So now let's go ahead and take it here, and we're just gonna mount these on right in the slot that we've cut out for it. Okay, like so. And we'll flip it over. And then let's just secure in these screws right here. So these, we just have M3 X nuts. So that's easy. So before we get too much farther along and add our covers and all those things, we should check to make sure the display is still working. So it's a little extra work, but I highly recommend it. So we're just going to plug in our wiring here. And if it's working correctly, then you're going to see the text Pixelcade just scrolling like you see there. So that means we're good. So we can continue. And let's go ahead and mount next the 7-segment LED display. So let's see, this one is actually, okay, so the bottom of it is where you see the decimal points, right? So that's the bottom. And then the way this one mounts, is basically just take it and we're just going to go through the bottom and just pop it in. And then we've got some holes here. We just line up the holes. So now we've got our 7-segment mounted. You can see here on the other side we've got our hex screws there. We've got our board. So again, I know it's extra work, but let's test it again to make sure all is good before we continue. Cool. Okay, so what I wanted to see was 2/8, which I see on the 7-segment. So that means we're good. And we can continue. So let's again unplug this. Okay, so the OLED, here's our little mini OLED. And now also is a good time to take off the protective covering because you won't be able to get to it later. And the way you mount the OLED, so here's the mount holes for the mini OLED. So basically you take this guy, then you take your OLED, it's the second one, pop it on there. Actually, let's start like this. So let's take 2 of these. You basically just make a little sandwich. So you're just sandwiching the OLED in between these 2 pieces. Because we need to do that because we need to make space, basically, because there's just some extra wires sticking out. So then you pop it in there. Actually, before we do that, then let's take our cover. Okay, so that's basically how it's going to go. And before we pop it in, let's get some screws. So M3 definitely will not work. I already tried that. So you gotta have M2. So let's do M2 by 20. And the way I've found the easiest way to do this is just take your, I think that's long enough. Let's get these through first. So we're basically looking like this. And then now just set it on there. Okay, and then just kind of hold it, flip it over, and then now we can screw it on the other side. It's actually not too bad. Okay, so this one, again, you don't want to make them too tight, but let's just tighten them up a little bit. Hand tight. So we got both our OLEDs mounted. So let's again do a quick power test. Wow, it worked. Amazing. So let's do the lights here. Okay, so I'm scrolling Pixelcade. I got my 88 and it say Pixelcade display accessory on both my OLEDs. So everything is working as it should. Awesome. Now we can continue. Let's just get these buttons out of the way. So, okay. These are coin buttons. We'll start with those. So it says coin on them. And if you're wondering why do you need two coin buttons, it's because, and I didn't know this either, because some of the older games had a coin button for player 1 and a coin button for player 2. So and for the older games, I guess you actually do need two coin buttons if player 2 is going to play. So that's why. Evidently, the newer games didn't have that. Let's see, let's do our USB. So this is just going to add some USB ports to the front panel, so if we ever need to hook up a keyboard or hook up some other controllers, like say gamepad controllers, then that would be very easy to do. Okay, so we got our USB. It's a pretty nice look to it, nice and flush. So we got our protector cover off, so now let's take the first one. So if you look at these covers, you want the one with the bigger opening, which is going to be this one. So that's going to set like that. Okay, so now we still see the screws and everything, but if I take the next piece, and now we're going to cover that up to have a little bit of a cleaner look. Okay, so at this point the 7-segment display is good, but this one is still sticking out. And the problem is if we don't layer it up more, these things will come out really easy. You can just knock them or someone can take them out. So we really want to just add 3 more just to build it up so it's almost flush. And that way you can't take it out. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Then we're just going to take some longer screws. I think these are M3 by 25. I think those will be long enough. Let's just double check. Yep, those are good. And actually, I have some finishing washers that I've been experimenting with that look pretty cool. So let's put 2 of those guys on there. And 2 more for the 7-segment as well. Yeah, I just got these on Amazon. They look pretty nice. So So now let's add the speaker. So the way we're going to do this is we have our laser cut grill covers that are going to go over it, and we're going to have a little hex stand as a little spacer. So let's put on that hex stand first. So now that we've got our hex stand on there, see the back, let's put on this cover because we don't want our speaker getting punctured. So that's the whole point, is to protect it. So these ones, we're just going to have a little small thumb screws here, and line this up and just pop those in. So here's the screws that came with the amp, and it's just slightly too short. So see the other one there, it's a little bit longer, so we're just going to switch over to those. Those are 440 by by half. So these are 1/2 inch long screws. 4/40. Alright, so yeah, I think that looks pretty good. So this is our finished speaker panel. Got all of our components in there. Lots of displays, lots of buttons. Let's see what it looks like on the back side. We need to clean up this wiring, so why don't we do that? Actually, we should do a test to make sure this still works, and then if it does, we should clean up our wiring.